question is that the motion be agreed to. Ian Lees-Galloway.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The health impacts of tobacco smoking have been well rehearsed in this Parliament time and time again with a number of measures designed to reduce the impact of tobacco-related harm having passed through Parliament in recent years. But I think it is worth just reminding ourselves briefly why it is that we are doing this and why we continue to come back to this issue. It is still estimated that half of long-term smokers die of a smoking-related illness, and that amounts to around 5,000 deaths each year in New Zealand that are attributable either directly to smoking or to second-hand smoke. Tobacco smoking shows up and is a cause of all of the big four health issues facing New Zealand: cancer, respiratory disease, cardiovascular disease and diabetes. And it is for that reason that it is important that the Government and Parliament do everything it can to reduce the prevalence of tobacco use in New Zealand. And of course we have that goal that we've all adopted to make New Zealand smoke-free by 2025. It is, as Chester Burrows said, an ambitious and lofty goal, but it is one which I think is achievable and one which we need to continue working towards, and we need to continue coming back to this issue. And it is in that sense that this particular bill, the Customs and Excise Tobacco Products Budget Measures Amendment Bill, is an important shift in the way Parliament deals with the issue of tobacco excise tax. Because whereas in the past we made one-off adjustments and increases to tobacco excise tax, this legislates for a series of 4 cumulative 10% increases on the 1st of January over each of the forthcoming 4 years. And Mr Speaker, that's an important development because the research tells us that each time there is an increase in the price of cigarettes and other tobacco products, we see a related response from smokers in engaging in quit attempts, contacting people like Quitline, and in fact in successfully quitting. But what the research also tells us is that we see a spike in activity, in quitting activity, immediately after that increase, and then that activity tails off. So we need to keep coming back to this. And as this bill allows for year after year, we may, as the research becomes more developed in this, we may want to look at whether annually is often enough, or if we want to revisit this issue more regularly than that, so that we keep capturing a new cohort of smokers. Because each time the price goes up, then we reach a new level. There's a certain price at which each cohort of smokers will engage in quit attempts, and as the price goes up and up and up, we capture a new group each time. And Mr Speaker, I think that's important. That this legislation allows for a 4-year period where that will continue to happen. I have to say, Mr Speaker, that this legislation has been able to pass because of the benign environment we find ourselves in Parliament with regard to issues of tobacco harm reduction and tobacco legislation. That hasn't always been the case, and it has been a barrier, I have to say, to measures like this occurring much sooner. We could have been doing this a decade ago, but I think it's fair to say the government wasn't prepared to come back to this time after time and face the fight that was put up by the National Opposition. Now, I'm pleased that the National Party have come around on this. It's not outrageous, Mr Woodhouse. It's not outrageous, Mr Woodhouse, because the National Party opposed Labour's excise increase. It opposed smoke-free environments legislation. It opposed getting smoking out of pubs and bars and restaurants. It opposed every initiative that the Labour Party brought to Parliament to reduce the harm of tobacco smoking. And I wanted to say, Mr Woodhouse, that I'm pleased that we now have a truce. I think it's great that we now have a truce, and around Parliament we have agreement that this is the right thing to do and we won't fight each other over it. And I just wanted to note that it is in that environment that this piece of legislation has been able to progress as far as it has through Parliament. Now, much has been made of the fact that these increases will not be factored in to the assessment of CPI increases, especially when it comes to assessing how much people who are receiving a benefit should receive in relation to the overall increase in cost of living. Now, I can see from a health perspective that is absolutely the right thing to do. We are trying to make tobacco products more expensive in real terms because the research, the evidence tells us that that is one of the most powerful ways to reduce the incidence of tobacco smoking. But it is important to note, I think, that this is one more way in which life is becoming that much more expensive for people on the lowest incomes and people who receive a benefit. And that is something that we have seen over the last 4 years under this government, life becoming just that much more difficult for those on the lowest incomes. And so it's important that we examine what other measures might we be engaging with that would reduce the incidence of smoking, but wouldn't have this financial impact on those people who are most vulnerable, who have the least. And one of the other things that the government could and should be doing that has a direct evidence base that supports carrying out this initiative is much greater use of social marketing to discourage people from smoking and to encourage them to quit. And the research tells us that there is a direct relationship between what's known as target audience rating points. In other words, both the volume of social marketing and the accuracy of its targeting at its target audience in getting people to quit. And we see the same spike in quit attempts around those types of social marketing campaigns as we see around increases in excise tax like this legislation allows for. However, unfortunately, under the current government, we have seen a reduction in funding for those types of social marketing campaigns and a reduction in those target audience rating points. So overall, the government is doing less of that type of social marketing that encourages people to quit smoking and discourages them from taking up smoking. And that, I think, is a real pity, Mr Speaker, because that is something which has a strong evidence base, but which does not directly impact the people who are smoking themselves. And it would go very well hand in hand with this type of measure. In fact, what would be ideal is with each of these excise increases, a very active social marketing campaign around those that also encourages people to quit. That would have a cumulative effect to really get the prevalence of smoking down and really advance New Zealand towards that goal of having the nation smoke-free by 2025. And I would like to see the government commit to more of that type of activity in addition to this taxation activity, which we do know will decrease the prevalence of tobacco smoking. Mr Speaker, Labour is pleased to support this bill. We are pleased to be constructive as an opposition on issues like this, where it is important that we get consensus around the House, and we look forward to further action taking New Zealand closer to that goal of becoming smoke-free.